Coming up, we've got controversy at SEC Media Days as a former Georgia quarterback has a real issue with Tennessee coach Jeremy Pruitt, and then Pruitt responds. We'll tell you all about it next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. It's former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson, and since this is our last week on the air, now it can sort of be told in some respects. One of the things that behind the scenes here has always driven some of the people that we work with crazy is the fact that I can never be on time. You know, this show, as I've said before, is supposed to start at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. It is 10 minutes after 3, and we've just gotten started. Like that, and many of you have been very patient with that over the years. The fact that the show has sort of had a little bit of a sliding start time. I don't think we've ever started like past 3:15 necessarily, but we've certainly pushed, and 3:10 is really about as late as we've started, but 3:05, kind of a regularity for us. Let me just say here on this, our final week on the air, that I greatly apologize for my just inability to be on time. It wasn't because I wasn't trying. Somehow we just can't seem to be on time.
Yeah, as long as we're opening up the curtain too. I think the AC is once again broken in the studio of ours. I am glistening right now after being at SEC Media Days all today. So you guys excuse the sweat running off my forehead.
But you know what? We'll all be sweating by the time it's done because we got some red hot SEC talk coming your way. How about that for a transition? Let me do item number 1 here on our SEC Country Live First in 10 list. Now I think this is really juicy here. An SEC coach going into his first media days and having to deflect some criticism right from the get-go. It starts on Tuesday when former Georgia quarterback turned analyst for the CBS Sports Network, Aaron Murray, goes on 102.5 FM in Nashville. Obviously being a Tennessee-based radio program, they ask him for his thoughts on Jeremy Pruitt. Now, as a person who's sort of been on both sides of these interviews over the years, occasionally interviewed myself, certainly doing plenty of interviews with former players such as Mike Johnson, almost all of these interviews go exactly the same way. Almost every one of these interviews is former player just sort of spouting off some sort of platitude. And guys like me sometimes aren't even listening to the answer because we're so sure of just how meaningless it's going to be. It's all just sort of soundbite, coach speaky type stuff, even from like radio and television professionals. But when the Tennessee folks asked Aaron Murray about Jeremy Pruitt, Murray had something to say, pretty specific. Here's an example of it from Nashville's 102.5 FM.
First off, talent-wise, they're far behind right now. I mean, talent-wise, it's not even close with them, South Carolina, Florida, Georgia. It's not there. So, I mean, he has a huge mountain to climb just to get them competitive in this league right now. And 2, honestly, I don't know if his personality is fit to be a head coach. I don't. As a head coach, there's so many things that go into it. It's not just going out there and coaching. You have to deal with front office. You have to go talk with the president of the university. You have to deal with boosters. You have to deal with the offense, the defense. It's not just going there and dealing with the kids and scheming up. There's a lot that goes into it. I don't think he's the right guy to kind of be the CEO of a corporation. He's really good managing just a defense and being a defensive coordinator. He needs to prove to me that he can handle the whole ship. For right now, I don't think he can.
So that's that's Aaron Murray talking about Jeremy Pruitt there, and it's one of those moments where if you're the radio host doing that interview, as I alluded to a moment ago, you say, "Wait, what? Are you actually telling me something real here? You don't think that Jeremy Pruitt's going to be a good coach at Tennessee?" Which obviously begs a follow-up. Why are you saying these things? What is it about Jeremy Pruitt that you don't like based on his past? And Aaron Murray had no problem kind of going there in terms of the issue that he has with Pruitt. Take a listen here to more.
Mine is when he was at Georgia, and the way he acted, the way he treated Coach Rick, I thought was poor. He wasn't as respectful as I thought a defense coordinator should be to a head coach. So that's my thing with authority. When he's dealing with the athletic director, when he's dealing with the president, when he's dealing with a booster who's giving millions of dollars, you can't go tell him to screw off. You have to take the meeting. You got to sit with them. Yeah, I know you want to be game planning and getting ready for the game, but you're a head coach now. You have to do these other things. Like I said, I think he's a really good defensive coordinator. I think when he has one mission, he's really good. But when you have to be pulled in 100 different directions, you have to be respectful and sit in all this other stuff. He needs to show me he can do that. I'm not saying he can't. He needs to show me he can, and that's his biggest hurdle as a head coach.
Couple points of clarity here. Aaron Murray's career at Georgia ends in 2013. Pruitt's career as Georgia defensive coordinator doesn't start until 2014, so they're actually not on campus at the same time together, but pretty clearly Murray has heard from people who apparently think they know some things about Jeremy Pruitt. You know Pruitt as well. What do you make of what Aaron Murray has to say here?
Well, it's almost like Aaron Murray knows something I don't. I don't think Jeremy Pruitt has shied away from any booster meetings. I don't think he's shied away from some of the responsibilities that are going to come along with a head coach. But the fact of the matter is he hasn't ever been a head coach, and so that is something still left to be decided in terms of what he's going to bring to the table at Tennessee. I understand Aaron Murray asking questions about it. I did want to know more about what he was saying about the disrespect with Mark Richt and some of the other things surrounding some of his opinions. To me, it almost sounded like Aaron's opinion about Pruitt as a head coach was formed because of a lack of respect for Mark Richt. I don't know if it's fair to make that assumption. I don't know if it's fair to say Jeremy Pruitt didn't respect Mark Richt at some point because he heard something and that says he's not going to respect boosters at Tennessee. But we've yet to see what Jeremy Pruitt is as a head coach, so if Aaron Murray wants to wonder that, I think that's fair.
So you may not remember this, but going back to last December, we actually, when Pruitt was hired for the Tennessee job, we played some audio then of a guy from DogNation.com, Chip Towers, that covered Jeremy Pruitt at Georgia back in 2015 when a lot of things blew up with Pruitt behind the scenes there at Georgia. And at the time, Chip Towers said that there were some concerns that he thought Tennessee ought to have about hiring Jeremy Pruitt. To sort of back up what Aaron Murray might be saying there, let me let you hear from a guy that knew the situation with Jeremy Pruitt at Georgia pretty well in terms of, you know, the demeanor appropriate for being a head coach. It sounds like Chip Towers has some questions too. Take a listen to this.
He is a good football coach. There's no question about it. But there's a lot of stuff that went on at Georgia. And look, you know, I mean, it did. You know, a lot of it we can't write. You know, you can't get people to be quoted about it and that kind of stuff. His stay at Georgia was volatile, tumultuous at the very least, and there were run-ins, there were personality conflicts. So I think the biggest challenge for Jeremy Pruitt at Tennessee is Jeremy Pruitt. How is he going to handle all those other things that require some subtlety? Because there's not a whole lot subtle about this guy.
So that's Chip Towers, a guy that knew the Pruitt situation well from December. What Aaron Murray says yesterday sort of echoes that. If you're a Tennessee guy, are you worried about this? If you're a fan, if you're even a person that's sort of in charge of employing Jeremy Pruitt, you worried about this at all?
I don't think so. And I wouldn't be worried. You know, listen, as a guy who knows Jeremy Pruitt, as a guy who's seen Jeremy Pruitt work, as a guy who knows what kind of coach he is, I wouldn't be worried about it at all. And the fact of the matter is, if Jeremy Pruitt had a problem with some of the things that Mark Richt was doing at Georgia, it wasn't the only one. I mean, Mark Richt is not at Georgia any longer, and so I don't know the ins and the outs. I don't know what the argument was about. I have a ton of respect for Mark Richt and the man he is and the things he did at Georgia, but I also feel very strongly that Jeremy Pruitt's a great head coach and he's going to do things at Tennessee. So I don't know the behind-the-scenes stories. I just know the way Jeremy Pruitt has always treated me and the kind of coach he's shown me that he can be in his time there at Alabama. And I still think Tennessee fans should be very confident in what they have in the head coaching position.
Speaking of Tennessee fans, they had a chance to see their guy, Jeremy Pruitt, take the podium for the first time today as head coach in the SEC at SEC Media Days in downtown Atlanta. As you might imagine, he was asked about his response to what Aaron Murray had to say, and Jeremy Pruitt gave a pretty forceful response to that. Here is Jeremy Pruitt for Media Days.
Well, first of all, you know, I coached against Aaron, and he was a fantastic player, great competitor. But, you know, I grew up a coach's son, you know, so when you're standing on the sideline, your dad's high school team is going 2-8, the folks up in the stands, even in Rainsville, Alabama, they're not real happy. So I realized at an early age that everybody has an opinion, and my dad told me, he said, as long as they pay their money, son, they can say whatever they want to. So I'm going to worry about the things that I can control, and I know who I am, and I'm comfortable with that.
So you hear Jeremy Pruitt there in that regard. There was another reporter who captured something that Pruitt said in a different venue at SEC Media Days. You're sort of bouncing from place to place, speaking to gaggles of reporters in different places. It's sort of hard to figure out who's going where and which room is different than the other. But David Ubben, a reporter that covers SEC Media Days, gets this quote from Jeremy Pruitt. He says, 15 years ago, I was a kindergarten teacher. Can you imagine Jeremy Pruitt teaching?
Unbelievable.
He says, 15 years ago, I was a kindergarten teacher. Now I'm the head coach of Tennessee. You probably don't make that ascension without knowing how to treat people. So Pruitt's clearly got a pretty strong response here to the criticism that's out there, or suggestions about his time going back to Georgia, which is, I believe, what Aaron Murray's referencing when he, in fact, we know that because he said about the way that he treated Mark Richt. What I don't think that Jeremy Pruitt wants, I don't think that he wants to rehash what happened in Georgia.
No.
It's pretty clear that he says, hey, I can't be too worried about criticism, and I can't be too worried about people who think I don't have the right demeanor to be a head coach. But what you won't hear Jeremy Pruitt say, and I think this is smart, you won't hear him say, hey, if anybody knows one reason why I shouldn't be a head coach, let them come forward right now and say it or forever hold their peace. Like, that's something that Jeremy Pruitt is not going to say.
Yeah, no, and I think that's fair. And listen, not everybody's going to like you. I think Jeremy Pruitt understands that. Not everybody. Listen, when Nick Saban got to Alabama, people trashed that guy up one side and down the other, and they still do, about the way he left Miami. Every Miami Dolphins player from the last 2 years was interviewed saying he made one guy cry, saying he stepped over somebody that was injured on the field, saying he didn't care about the players. And I'm sitting there as one of his new players going, oh, my God, like, what am I getting myself into? This guy.
Somebody said he stepped over.
Like an injured player, and he was like, everybody moved the drill. And it wasn't just an injury. I think it was like a heat exhaustion kind of thing going on.
I'm not laughing about that.
I don't know.
That's a pretty villainous.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't know what to think. It didn't change the way I felt about Nick Saban. It didn't change the way he coached me. It doesn't change the fact that I love Nick Saban as a head coach. So not everybody's going to like you. And I think that Jeremy Pruitt, that's what he was trying to kind of say in front of the podium. Listen, I have a lot of respect for Aaron. I'm not going to go down that road of what happened at Georgia, and things are the way they are, and I'm thankful that I'm at Tennessee.
Yeah, listen, behind closed doors, I'm not an expert on what happened at Georgia when Jeremy Pruitt was there, and the people have shared with me what they think they know about what happened behind closed doors. I'm not at liberty to quote them on this, so there's not really a whole lot I can speak in terms of expertly in terms of how the Pruitt situation went down there at UGA, but what I will tell you is this, is that just from the perspective that we can all get looking at Georgia before 2014, before Jeremy Pruitt got there was something lacking at UGA. They've been close to, to the national championship in 2012, almost beat Alabama in the SEC championship, but recruiting didn't really take the big boost from that moment the way that you thought it might. I don't know that Mark Richt was always great at maximizing his scholarships. I don't know that he was always great at being as aggressive in the recruiting trail as he needed to be. I do think that Jeremy Pruitt did bring a dose of something that Georgia really needs. Now, if it is true, as Aaron Murray suggests, that Pruitt was disrespectful to Mark Richt, I think that is crossing a line. I think you can push a program to achieve more without being disrespectful to your boss here. But listen, there's no doubt that Jeremy Pruitt, the energy that he has, that Tennessee's going to sort of tap into over the next few years here, Georgia needed it in 2014.
Well, not only that, but let's look at the Tennessee situation. Their fans were ready to fight last year when this head coaching search was underway. They've had 5 years of Butch Jones kind of trying to make things sound better than they are. They've had 5 years of Butch Jones kind of sugarcoating things. So listen, if they're getting a coach in there that's not okay with some of the things that are going on, and one of those coaches that's kind of fighting and scratching and clawing, good or bad, then I think Tennessee fans love it. It's definitely a change-up from what they've had under Derek Dooley and Butch Jones.
So on today's program, and for the next 2 days, we're going to take a lot of comments here. And I saw some people on Facebook already, Zach Smith, Tim Glover, Christy Hardy, as an example. People saying, wait, what's going on here? This is the last week for SEC Country Live. Yes, we made that announcement yesterday, and I don't want to do the whole thing over again. You can go back and check out yesterday's show for more details, but I do know that we have people that get a chance to watch one day that don't see every day of the week, so we'll rehash some of it here. SEC Country, the website that we sort of have been partnered with, ceased its operations on June 30th, and we were obviously in every attempt to keep doing SEC Country Live. I'm proud to say that we've been able to do it here now for the last few weeks. Mike and I, our commitment to this kind of content has never wavered. He and I are looking forward to doing some projects together again in the very near future. But in terms of this show live every Monday through Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, this is our last week doing that. We're going to go out with a bang, celebrating the same kind of stuff we've always done here, our love for SEC football today and then tomorrow, but do want to be clear about that and be really clear about how you can find out about what's next for him and me and us together here. It's the SEC Country Live YouTube feed. Now listen, here's the thing I've learned in life. Nothing's ever easy. Everything's complicated. Come to find out, there's an SEC Country YouTube page and an SEC Country Live YouTube page.
I did not know that.
Yeah, you need to like the one that's SEC Country Live. Please like that YouTube page. Before it didn't really matter, but I guess now it probably does. SEC Country Live on YouTube. Like that page. Follow that page. Also our podcast. We've been doing this show as a podcast for years and years and years. Not years and years and years, but as long as we've done the show, we've done it as a podcast. Many of you only watch it, but we've got thousands of people who listen to that every single day. So If you're a podcast listener, keep that feed active. And if you've never tried the podcast before, click on over there, subscribe to that podcast. That's a great way to find out what Mike and I, as far as what we're doing together, what's going to happen next on that. So please check that out. And of course, we look forward to taking a lot of your comments on this. Stephen Early says, BA, does Dog Nation in too? No, I'm very proud to say that the Dog Nation is going to continue just like it always has. SEC Country Live, always a separate entity there in that regard. So Dog Nation, as you've come to know and expect it, nothing different about that. But SEC Country Live, we will be saying goodbye to you here tomorrow. By the way, thanks to Michael Carvel, who's a great partner for us doing this show, who put a link to the YouTube page there in the comment section, so appreciate that. Christy Hardy says, sad to see you guys off of here. Christy, I really appreciate that. Thank you for watching the show when you can. That's a really nice thing to do. Going back to the football subject here for a moment, let me get D. Pickett's comment, who says, Pruitt is not going to get fired like that. So D, obviously referencing some other people in the comment section, saying that it's going to be a tumultuous issue for Pruitt. And if you want to go back to the conversation we were having on that, as D. Pickett says in the comments, it is going to be one of those issues here where the Pruitt demeanor is in question and the landing spot there at Tennessee is also in question. You and I both believe that Philip Fulmer, the Tennessee athletic director, is a strong personality. He's the kind of guy that wants to be in the spotlight, wants to have his degree of control. Yeah. Tennessee, I agree with what Aaron Murray said in the outset of his initial comment. It's not a talented team right now. Questions about Jeremy Pruitt's demeanor are even more relevant given the fact that Tennessee's got some real issues both on and off the field.
Yeah, I think this is going to be, in my opinion, this is going to be a great example of winning cures all. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just the bottom line. If you can go up to Tennessee and you can win football games and you can have some upsets and you can knock off some teams and you can get that team to 7 wins, possibly 8 wins this year, I don't know where the blueprint is to get you that. I don't know where that roadmap is. But if you can get to 7, 8 wins and knock off some teams along the way, guess what? People aren't going to care about what Jeremy Pruitt did. People aren't going to care about what Aaron Murray or David Pollock or anybody thinks of Jeremy Pruitt. As a matter of fact, he will probably be even more celebrated for some of the background he had if he can go out and win football games.
Matt Hall says, y'all are great. It's a sad day. I appreciate that. Other comments in the comment section, Justin Worley says it's a sad day for him too. He says it's his birthday. We appreciate, first of all, Justin, you watching on your birthday there, and thanks for your support of SEC Country Live over the years. We certainly appreciate that. Let me get one more comment here on this. I'm going to pop over to YouTube for a moment. Zach Smith says, thanks for the clarification, guys. Y'all be back bigger and better when you get back to the SEC Live shows. There's obviously a big market for this type of show, and you guys are the best. Zach, we certainly appreciate that, and we're excited about a lot of things coming up in the very near future. Let me also say hello to our YouTube audience, take some comments there on Jeremy Pruitt. Then I want to talk about the Florida Gators here for a moment. Over here on YouTube, let me pick up some comments. Adam Hopper says that Jeremy Pruitt was lucky. He's the 10th choice for the Tennessee job. Expectations, therefore, have got to be low. And I understand where Adam's coming from in the comment section on that. Obviously, there is, the truth. They were going to hire Greg Schiano, and they looked at a lot of other names before they got to Jeremy Pruitt. But this is still the SEC. This is still a Tennessee program that's had as much success as really anybody in this league has, probably south of Alabama. And from that standpoint, I think the Pruitt expectations are still pretty high because Vols fans are hungry.
They are, and that's why I kind of just laugh this off as, hey, this is prime SEC Media Days talk. And listen, I think a lot of things get a bad rap during the offseason because you say, boy, this is offseason talk, this is June talk, this is May talk. Media Days isn't supposed to be about that. Media Days is supposed to be about Media Days when you finally get some good information that you can go off of. But it's going to be a talking point for a couple of different reasons because Georgia and Tennessee is a rivalry game. And when you have one guy as popular as Aaron Murray and David Pollock talking back and forth to the head coach at the University of Tennessee, you're going to have some kind of bad feelings about that.
William Lee on the YouTube comment section says about my show, Dog Nation Daily, that there are lots of good info on there, even with BA's typical UGA spin. I will tell you, we had some non-Georgia fans that have been, viewers of us here on SEC Country Live that checked out the show today, and that was great. You'll still be able to see Mike on there a lot, so that'll still be a great way to check in. Morgan Recton says, I was on Dog Nation Daily today. They were very welcoming to a Gator. See, I mean, look, I really do mean this. And see, what happens on Dog Nation Daily sometimes, and let me go off on a quick tangent here for like 2 seconds, then we'll get back to it. Because Dog Nation Daily is a fairly, sizable audience for a show about one team, every now and then we have some sort of trolls that invade, and some of the Dog fans can get a little bit ornery about that, as you might expect. Yeah. But in terms of like Morgan Recton, some of this good-natured stuff, William Lee, people like that, good-natured stuff, Georgia fans can be fairly welcoming in that.
Listen, I hop on with you every Wednesday in the morning. I do the show. And they're very welcoming.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of good comments from Georgia fans. I do sometimes. I'm like, man, I should get on there and see what they thought about what I just said. Like just to make sure that I'm not getting hammered. But you're right. They're great over in that comment.
Yeah, listen, I mean, they don't love everything I say either sometimes. So that's just par for the course there on that. By the way, Steve Weaver says about Jeremy Pruitt, it's like kindergarten cop. Now, you may not be old enough to remember the movie from the early 90s when Arnold Schwarzenegger played the kindergarten cop. That is kind of what Jeremy Pruitt reminds me of.
Yeah, I have no idea. I've never seen the movie.
Oh, you haven't seen that movie? Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit like that sort of fish out of water there in that environment. Nonetheless, let's go to number 2 here on our SEC Country Live First in 10 list. And speaking of Georgia, the shirt that I'm wearing here today, a lot of Florida players at SEC Media Days yesterday talking about that big rivalry game with Georgia. And clearly this was a series that Florida's dominated for a long time, but it was 42-7 a year ago with Georgia over the Gators. And Florida fans and Florida players, I should say, think that in 2018 things could be different. In fact, they're not quite so sure that what you saw in that game in 2017 was necessarily the best foot forward for the Florida Gators. As an example of that, here's one of the leaders for the Gators, C.C. Jefferson, describing what he thinks could happen next in the series.
Oh, most definitely, because if you look back a year before, then that's the same backfield, some of the same old linemen, so same defense. So, yeah, I would say that we are that close, and that score doesn't determine, that who's the better team.
So listen, that's C.C. Jefferson, one of the leaders on the Florida defense. On the other side of the ball, one of those offensive leaders is Martez Ivey, the anchor, the left tackle for that Florida offensive line. And much like C.C. Jefferson, Martez Ivey thinks that, yeah, you know what, this rivalry that's so important to him, he thinks it could change in 2018. Here's Martez.
Since the 3 years I've been here, I feel like that was like the most intense game I feel like we was ever going to play. Just see how Florida always ran the ball on Georgia as coming in as a freshman. Just seeing how physical it was, seeing all the trash talk. I remember the hit when Brandon Spikes put on that running back, I believe. That's how I knew. I was like, oh, this is going to be the most intense game I play in my life. And I was trying to prepare myself for it and just understand, get out there, what's going to happen under the power, the trash talk that was going to happen. That's getting way closer than what the scoreboard put out last year.
Now, you can hear one more Florida player here, the linebacker David Rees, who, while he's just as optimistic and hopeful as Martez Ivey and C.C. Jefferson about what the future could look like, Rees is not in denial about the fact that 2017 for the Gators was a game that did not turn out well. It really got away against UGA. Here's a bit from David Rees.
They came to play. They had an older team that, all came back for the 5th year, and they had a great squad last year. And they went far. They had 2 of the best running backs probably in college football. That game just, we let that one slip away.
So let me speak as a fan here just for a moment. For a long time, and obviously you can see the Georgia shirt here, I really wanted Florida to care about the Georgia rivalry again. One of the things that kind of frustrated me as a fan was that Florida's got a Tennessee rivalry. It's got a Florida State rivalry.
Right.
And when it's winning...
LSU.
LSU is a big rivalry now. But, at a time when they were dominating Georgia, and they were for a long time, they were more worried about what Philip Fulmer was doing at Tennessee.
Right,
more worried about what Bobby Bowden might be doing at Florida State. Maybe even, Jimbo Fisher at Florida State here in our recent years. I wanted Florida to care about Georgia again. The most satisfying thing for me about my team beating Florida last year is Florida's forced to care now.
Right.
Florida is forced to say, you know what, we got to pay real close attention to Georgia. And yes, over the last few decades, it's obviously been an imbalance in favor of Florida, but that doesn't do much to make Martez Ivey feel better, doesn't do much to make C.C. Jefferson feel better, David Rees feel better. If you're a Florida fan, you love the idea of those guys being eager and hungry to play Georgia again. But if you're a Georgia fan, you love the idea of Georgia, by going out and doing what it did a year ago, has made the Georgia-Florida rivalry matter again. And I think Jacksonville could be pretty interesting here again this year.
I was in a scenario just like that when I was in school.
Yeah.
When I was in college, I showed up and Auburn had beaten Alabama 4 straight years or something like that, routed off a couple of more wins in a row. And all I wanted was for Auburn fans and Auburn to understand what Alabama was again, what they could be capable of. And it didn't happen until 2008. You win 36-0 and Tuberville's fired, and that it resembles that a lot. It resembles a similar situation where, hey, we're back, and we're back to doing Alabama things, and we can be talked about amongst the elite teams again. I understand the eagerness, and I love that coming out of the Florida players. I think you have to have that attitude if you're a Florida player looking at this Georgia game, because not only was Georgia successful on the field, they were successful in recruiting last year too. So that kind of has a bunch of alarm bells going off. But, listen, I have no problem with what they were saying, and I think that, eagerness to have that game be played again, I'm sitting in the driver's seat with that as well, saying I can't wait to watch the game this year.
Maybe I'm just in a little bit of a sentimental mood because it's our last week on the air, but I'm actually going to say something nice about Florida here, so y'all be careful.
Everybody buckle up.
Just be real careful here that you don't have a coronary or something. I've actually heard a lot over the last few days from both Martez Ivey and CeCe Jefferson, and they sound like leaders.
Yeah.
They really do.
I agree.
I heard a lot from CeCe Jefferson yesterday. I had a chance to just sort of digest a lot of what he said, a lot of these various media availabilities. Jefferson comes across like a real leader,
yes.
and Martez Ivey to me does as well. And some people would say, well, Ivey's been a disappointment. I told you my thoughts on this the other day. If you're starting in the SEC as an offensive lineman and even if you're not the anchor left tackle for your full career, but he was in no danger of ever being replaced as a starting offensive lineman for Florida, you may not be as good as you maybe one day will be or as good as some Florida fans hoped you would be, but you're good enough because you're starting battling against these elite defensive lines in the SEC week in and week out. So that aside, Ivey and Jefferson come across as real leaders. Now, I'm not going to change my opinion that Florida has still got a lot of holes on its roster. I'm sorry, I just do still believe that. But if you're a Florida fan, I do think you feel really good. But the fact that on one side of the ball with Jefferson, on the other side of the ball with Ivey, you got some real leadership that you can depend on there.
Well, and I'll go a step further because at this point last year, what were the talking points? Malik Zaire, Antonio Callaway. I mean, we had a ton of talking points that weren't about leadership and that weren't about the football game and weren't about the football team. It was about off the field stuff. It was about transfers. It was about Jim McElwain's future. It was about a shark, photo that came out right before SEC Media Days. And it just feels like this is a more prepared Florida team, that things have calmed down, that all of a sudden Martez Ivey can focus on playing left tackle. Not that he wasn't doing it before, but the issues coming out in the weight room, it feels like this is a Florida team that can finally focus on what they need to be. And I think that kind of goes under the radar when you talk about Dan Mullen, but he brings a level of consistency to that program that I don't think they've had in quite a long time.
How about Dante Edey and Michael Collum in the Facebook comment section? Dante says, really, BA, you're going to be nice to Florida? Michael Collum says, oh, no, don't be nice to those Gators, LOL. Although Stephen Early, who's also a really good Georgia fan, he also says, no doubt to what I just said. I have to give it to them. They are speaking well and saying all the right things. And listen, saying all the right things when you've sort of practiced for this moment is a little easier to do than you might think if you actually go out and follow up on that in practice. But you got to have some leadership to lean on. And in the case of Jefferson and Ivey, I think they've at least got that anchor that they can depend on.
Well, and not only that, but how many times have you and I talked about on the show, listen, if you're going to be a leader, you have to be a good football player first.
We've said that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these are the only two 5-star guys left on the roster.
Was Jefferson a 5-star?
I think that CeCe Jefferson was a 5-star player, and I know Martez Ivey was as well. I think these are the most talented guys, as far as from a recruiting standpoint, that are left on this this Florida roster moving forward.
How about Greg Steele, a Florida fan, also in our Facebook comment section? I told you. Here I just said something nice about Florida. I really gave them a nice compliment for CeCe Jefferson and Martez Ivey. Greg Steele puts 1980 in the comment section. That's Georgia's last consensus national
Never
champion.
ends.
Listen, I probably deserve that in some respects, but that's just an example of the grief that I have to take every day here in this discussion. Steve Quinn, though, over on YouTube says, frankly, I'm sick of hearing about Florida. South Carolina beat them last year. South Carolina started more underclassmen than any Power 5 school. Like I said yesterday, Mullen won nothing at Mississippi State. So that's Steve Quinn saying that this, to the extent there is hype for Florida, he thinks it's overstated at the expense of South Carolina. And I don't deny that South Carolina is a better team than Florida. Is Florida maybe a more interesting story just because it's a former national championship program and it's got a brand new coach? Now, it's not more interesting if you are a South Carolina fan, but there's a reason why Florida is getting the attention that it's getting because of where it's been in the past, where it's trying to get back to. But in terms of talking up this year, if you're talking up Florida at the expense of South Carolina, I agree with Steve Quinn on that, then you're making a mistake.
No, yeah, I think so too. Listen, you guys know that I'm higher on Florida than most, and I'm lower on South Carolina than most. But I think this is going to be a game, one of those games that to me shapes the East. You know what I mean? Like, we expect Georgia to be good. Not sure what Tennessee's going to be. South Carolina's getting a lot of love for that second spot, but I do think that Florida could put together a good enough schedule and a good enough run to where they can make a shot and make that South Carolina game really be one of those that molds what the standings look like at the end of the year.
Steve Weaver and Alexander Rain meant fun of me because when I meant to say Mullen, I said Muffin. The comment was from Steve Quinn that Mullen won nothing. And I sort of like conflate all that together into Muffin. So now they're having some fun with me for calling Mullen the Muffin Man there. All right, item number 3 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So it's been kind of actually sad this week because SEC Media Days has been literally just right down the road from where we do this show from every single day. And I've been busy. I shouldn't have been over there at all.
Yeah.
I didn't go to any of like the receptions, didn't go to any of the the sessions during the day, but I did sneak over there for a minute this afternoon. I actually bumped into Mike Johnson, who, listen, y'all should see Mike Johnson.
Oh,
SEC
here we
days.
go.
This guy's you backslapping, high-fiving,
There we
kissing
go,
babies.
man.
I mean, I have to sort of get out of the way of the throngs of people trying to say hello to Mike Johnson. But I did bump into Mike, and we saw like 9 seconds of Saban speak, and then I said, all right, I'm bored. I'm going back to work.
Listen, I've seen Nick talk plenty of times. I didn't need to sit and watch him talk in front of a podium.
But there was something interesting you said. I don't have the audio to play for this. I apologize. But Jalen Hurts, at least it sounds like, based on some quotes we saw from AL.com, who was obviously on hand for what Saban had to say there, that he sort of acknowledged that he doesn't know for sure that Jalen Hurts is going to be on the team coming up this summer and this fall. That, now, when you hear the audio, maybe it comes across a little bit different, but when you read that, I don't know, those 3 words in response to, is Hurts going to be on this team, that gets your attention a little bit, doesn't it?
No, listen, it reminds me of like a movie or show. You ever see like an alert comes out and everybody's phone starts going off at the same time? It's like everybody's phone started going off at the same time because Nick Saban, when asked about Jalen Hurts, said, I'm not sure. I have no idea, I think.
I have no idea,
Which is even a stronger, kind of statement than I'm not sure. And listen, I think this is Nick Saban. I don't want to say it as wits in, but this is not a statement you would have heard Nick Saban make 3 months ago. Right. I think that I think there's some stuff going on that he's like, listen, I'm sick of hearing about these questions, and the bottom line is I'm going to tell you up front, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with with Jalen. I don't know what's going on with his dad. This was Nick Saban to me a little bit as wits in.
I don't have the fancy quote to put on the screen here, but I can read this to you from AL.com. Saban says about Hurts, I have no idea. I expect him to be there. I think it's our job to give both players, he means Jalen and Tua, a fair opportunity to have a chance to win the job at their position. We'll create a role for one or both. Ooh, that's interesting. We'll create a role for one or both those guys on the team, and they'll all have to make a decision based on what the outcome is as what their future is at Alabama. We certainly want every player to stay at the University of Alabama and graduate. Jalen has a great opportunity to do that in December, so we're hopeful he will stay there and be a graduate regardless of his circumstances as a player. But that's not to minimize his chance of making a starter or making a great contribution to our team in some way, even if he isn't the starter. So that's a couple interesting things there from Saban. I sort of agree with you that a typical Saban response on something like this for me would be, why wouldn't Jalen Hurts be here? What, do you know something I don't know? Why wouldn't Jalen Hurts be here? Essentially deflecting the idea of a transfer. Yeah. This is what in politics they call granting the premise of the question. Politicians all the time, they'll be asked a certain issue and they'll just sort of pivot to another talking point. They don't grant the premise of the question. Saban grants the premise that, yes, there's a chance that Hurts might transfer. That means that he takes this seriously. And let me tell you what I believe is going on here, and you can tell me if I'm wrong. I think that Saban is less worried about Hurts than he is the next generation of Jalen Hurts. Next generation of elite quarterback. And I don't think you want to be seen as holding Jalen Hurts hostage. I do take Saban at his word that he hopes that Hurts doesn't transfer. I think all Alabama fans should feel the same way. You're better with Hurts on your team, even if there's a little bit of a controversy right now. But Saban knows that he's being watched, maybe even being watched by 2019, 2020 quarterbacks, although they're pretty well stocked for the class of 2019. They've got offers out already for 2020 QBs, including a kid not too far from where we do this show right now. The point here is I think Saban wants to be seen as being magnanimous in the direction of Jalen Hurts. I think he wants him to stay, but I don't think he's going to use the media to coerce him.
No, well, here's what I kind of take it, and I think you're kind of on the right track there with, this might have other implications, but to me, this also tells recruits, hey, I'm going to play the best player. And I think that's one of the things Nick Saban's having to hold himself accountable for is, hey, listen, I told Tua when I was recruiting him, don't worry about Jalen. Well, guess what? The time has come to where I have to play the best player, and all of a sudden Tua's out there. I also want to read this comment because I don't agree with the whole thing, but I think there is something to it, and it's from Alexander Rain in the YouTube comment section. He says, Nick needs to make up his mind about who the starter is as soon as possible, then whatever happens, happens. Don't agree with that. But I do agree with his next part. He says, you can't let either of those young guys hold you hostage in any way. And I think that's, to me, that's at the root of what Nick was saying today. It's like, you know what? By God, the quarterback's only one position on this football team. And you know what? If Jalen leaves, then that's on Jalen.
Yeah.
And right now, I don't know what's going to happen when things kick off against Louisville, but we've got two talented quarterbacks right now.
Well, let me ask you this, because, I mean, to go along with the comment there from YouTube, we had people suggest that the Tungo Vailoa family, I'm talking about media people, reporters that knew the Alabama recruiting scene, we had reporters suggest that the Tungo Vailoas tried to manipulate that situation with Nick Saban in Alabama. Do you think Saban felt manipulated by this? Do you think he felt pressure to play Tua Tagovailoa in the national championship? Lane Kiffin said that he heard that Tua was going to transfer. Tua himself talked about the possibility of transferring. Do you think that Saban knew he had to put Tua in the game or risk losing him in offseason?
I don't think it dates back to last year, not in my opinion. I think that any pressure that Nick Saban felt about putting Tua in the game, in my opinion, was because of the loss to Auburn and how bad the offense looked. And that, listen, Auburn's had some success against Alabama. They've never beaten Alabama like that since Nick Saban's been there. They just haven't. The game hasn't looked that way. So I think that Nick Saban probably has some pressure from the Tagovailoa family. I think that that's probably a real storyline, but I don't think it dates back to last year. And I think that Nick coming out of the Nick's Kid Charity Golf Tournament a month ago and saying, hey, listen, keep your head down and continue to work, I think that was addressed at both of those families.
A couple other quick things here from the AL.com quote. I mean, everybody was there, but I'm just reading it from AL.com. He says, Saban about Jalen Hurts, we'll create a role for one or both those guys. Then he goes on to say the possibility of making a great contribution to our team in some way, even if he isn't the starter. Is he talking about playing a different position right there, or is that reading too much into it?
Well, it could be.
Playing a role, making a contribution. Is that H-back?
I don't think so. I think this is finding a situational, type of quarterbacking position for whatever they need on the field. And I think that's what a lot of people have pointed to. Hey, listen, if it's 3rd and 3 and you need a poor man's kind of, back there where he can throw or run, and you can put Jalen in. Otherwise, it's evident that Tua has more arm talent and he needs to be in all those situations. It's interesting because it is backwards of the Tebow-Chris Leak debate. Tua's a thrower, and if you have the better thrower at quarterback, then you don't take him out in certain situations. So I think that's what Nick Saban's dealing with right now.
All right, item number 4 here in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. It was Mississippi State's day at SEC Media Days today as well. In fact, you and I essentially almost ran right into Joe Morehead as he was moving from one portion of the room to another. Another guy that was on hand there for them was the Bulldogs quarterback, Nick Fitzgerald. He spoke to ESPN, and the big question facing Fitzgerald, especially coming off that Egg Bowl where he left with an injury, is are you healthy? Are you ready to go again for 2018? And Fitzgerald's fired up and ready to go. Here's what Fitz told ESPN.
Absolutely 100%. We've been working on a lot in the offseason. Since I started running, I think in February, I've been really, really focusing on building functional strength, the balance, the flexibility I'm going to need to go back out there and make the cuts and then make the runs I'm going to need to make. So at this moment, 100%, running with the team, doing everything that the team does, agility-wise, sprints, all that.
By the way, we've been talking about our last week here on the air. Brent Hickman in the Facebook comment section says, do you guys see how often this show's watched through Facebook, like how YouTube does it? Really don't want this show to go away. Brent, we really appreciate that. And obviously, we're excited about some of the things we're going to be able to do for you in the future. And one of the things I'm really proud of is if you go and, listen, this is going to come across as slightly immodest. I don't mean for it to, but if you go look, and every episode we've ever done of SEC Country Live is still chronicled for now on the SEC Country Facebook page. I don't know how many total views we've put together, but it's in the tens of millions. So thankfully for us, we've been able to put up some pretty big numbers here, and we had some great sponsors that were lined up ready to go for us this upcoming fall. Sometimes things are just a little bit more complicated than just what you think the basic name of the game is with viewership and sponsorship. But you know what? We've got nothing but good things to say about the time we've been on the air here. Really, really grateful for the opportunity. Had we not been given this chance to speak to all of you, I think our life would be less because of it. So I'm grateful for the numbers that we put up and posted, and I'm really excited about what we've got going on in the future.
No, and grateful that obviously those numbers come from people tuning in on the daily. It's not just people happening upon the page. You guys that have turned on your notifications. That's been the lifeline of the show.
You believe Nick Fitzgerald when he says he's healthy?
I do, and listen, I've told you guys this before on the show. I had the same injury that Nick Fitzgerald had. I had a broken leg and a dislocated ankle, and it is an extremely hard injury to come back from. But I think he did it to a lesser degree where he didn't have to have the microfracture surgery. Most of his cartilage was intact. You pop it back in place, you put a plate in his leg. I don't know. It's hard for me to look at him and say, boy, he's definitely going to be the best runner he's ever been this year. But listen, Joe Morehead's already come out and said that, he's going to be a little bit more of a passing quarterback, and maybe that has a lot to do with Nick Fitzgerald and talking about his health.
Yeah, deep throws, more RPOs.
Yeah.
You get the sense from Morehead, who's done great things for Trace McSorley. You almost wonder if Morehead's even in the spy had McSorley not broken out such a big way for Penn State.
I'm laughing right now because, listen, it's the last week of the show. I want to tell this story anyways. BA and I are sitting in the hallway earlier, and Joe Morehead walks out of, kind of one of his press conference rooms, and me and BA are not even looking at Joe Morehead, and he looks in and goes, "How you guys doing?" And I looked at BA and I go, "Who is that?" he walked up on us. We were sitting there having a talk in the conversation in the hallway, and Joe Morehead walks right up to us and says, "Hey, how are y'all doing?" I said, "Who was that? That was Joe Morehead." I was like, man, I didn't even know who the guy was. That just kind of little inside peek at SEC media.
Mississippi State fans, though, say that you're going to recognize that face anywhere in a couple
of
years.
Listen, he was a big guy. He was way bigger than I thought he was. I just wasn't used to seeing him kind of walk up on us, so it took me by surprise while you and I were just chit-chatting about something that was not Mississippi State.
Right, exactly. It's kind of funny stuff there. All right, let me do item number 5 here in our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. I want to play a little audio from Chad Morris, who made his SEC Media Days debut yesterday, the Arkansas head coach, first time being there, of course. And I want you to hear this. I want to find out from you if your reaction to this is the same as mine. Here is Chad Morris talking about how excited he is to be a part of his very first SEC Media Days.
They told me there would be a few cameras here today, so I think a few would probably be a little bit of an understatement. But I've been really excited. Growing up and being a fan of college football, and when I was coaching high school ball, even at some of my prior stops, you knew that when you turned on the television and you saw the SEC Media Days being televised, you knew that football season was starting. And to know that I'm on the platform and part of the kickoff of college football, I'm extremely excited about this opportunity that we have.
So I think that Chad Morris does a great job telling that story. There's only one problem with it as far as I can tell. Well, yeah, he's not exactly Mr. Energy.
Yeah.
But SEC Media Days being on TV is a fairly new phenomenon.
Yeah.
This idea that, boy, I grew up watching this thing on television every single year.
Yeah.
Listen, I mean, I was at SEC Media Days like a few years ago and it wasn't on TV.
Right, yeah.
So let's not act like this was like some rite of passage for young college football fans growing up. This thing's been on TV for like 5 minutes. I mean, 3 years ago, I'm not even sure this thing was on TV.
Another funny part is, and you guys might not realize this behind the scenes, is that somebody walks up and puts a water bottle on the podium after every coach speaks. I don't know if you caught the beginning of Chad Morris, but he walks out and he kind of looks down in the microphone and he goes, "Is this my water or is this the previous coach's water?" Like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to drink the water. He was like, "Is this for me?
Is this a prop water? Or is this like a drink water?
Am I a VIP here? Like, okay, I'm going to drink this water." I think he brought his own water to the podium because he wasn't sure if he'd have one.
Listen, it's got to be nerve-wracking. One more sort of behind-the-scenes story from today. Like I said, most of the media men sort of camped out there all week long. I literally went today for the first time. And in the moment I walked through the door, they have like the blue carpet set up for like the coaches to sort of walk in the room for the first time, and they were anticipating Saban, a lot of fans in the building, and so I walked right in and walked right through that carpet with cameras up and fans all around. They were all waiting for Saban to come through, and it's disconcerting. You're like, whoa, what is all this attention for? Is Saban behind me right now? Of course, he's not. He's still several minutes away. But can you imagine being Chad Morris and you're getting that attention? At SMU Media Days and the American Athletic Conference, that wasn't happening. Now, he was offensive coordinator at Clemson, but you don't go to Media Days when the offensive coordinator at Clemson. And ACC Media Days ain't nothing like SEC Media Days. This is a real culture shock for him.
Yeah, no, and I think that really speaks, in my opinion, to the uphill grind that Chad Morris has ahead of him. I mean, Arkansas has had some good years, but they are definitely on a downhill slope. And Chad Morris being tasked with the guy that's supposed to start sending this thing in the other direction, I think the reaction to Chad Morris at Media Days tells the story of where this program is right now and just how much work he has left ahead of him.
Steve Weaver says Chad Morris sounds like he's already reached the apex and now he's heading for the fall. Certainly, Arkansas fans hope that's not the case.
Yeah, and listen, Chad Morris, to me, is one of those guys that he runs a system. And I found out today, by the way, that Chad Morris didn't play college football, which I thought was very interesting. He graduated from Texas A&M but didn't play at Texas A&M. Chad Morris is one of those guys to me that runs an offensive system that can do more with less. And I think right now, that's a perfect situation and scenario for Arkansas.
Morgan Recton says, Chad Morris was talking like he's running for office. Please vote for me as your head coach. #vote Morris. I will say that all these SEC coaches in venues like this, they always kind of come across to me, especially the ones that aren't like Saban, and some of those, guys that you've just sort of gotten really, really used to seeing, they all sort of come across as sort of a combo, kind of a cross between like a politician, like a Baptist preacher. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like you're out there pounding on that podium, they're about to give you like an altar call. They all kind of come across that way to me.
Yeah, they definitely do. I mean, and I wasn't knocking on Chad Morris earlier when I acted like I was, when I was snoring. That's how all these coaches are at the podium. It's like, listen, you and I walked out 3 minutes into Nick Saban's speech, and it was like he started talking about some charitable stuff and making sure players are prepared for the future. And I love him for it, but I was like, hey, listen, I'm going to fall asleep sitting here. So,
Bo Molinari in the YouTube comment section says the best thing that happened for Arkansas is what happened in Oxford, Mississippi. A door opened for Arkansas to maybe climb up because of the troubles with the Rebels there. That's an interesting point. Item number 6 here on our SEC Country Line First and 10 list, and Jeremy Pruitt offers an update today on Trey Smith. Seems like a good news here. It looks like that Pruitt, and we've been anticipating this for a while now based on the little whispers that Pruitt gives here and there. It seems like Pruitt thinks that Trey Smith's on his way back and ready to go again for the Vols, which if you're a Tennessee fan, I mean, that's just a must-have. Smith is one of the best offensive linemen in the league. I think he's the best player on the Tennessee roster. It's just an anchor if there ever was one, and the fact that Pruitt's been so hopeful this offseason about Trey Smith, who's had sort of an undisclosed physical illness here, if you're a Tennessee fan, it's great news if Trey Smith truly is in good health again, but from a football standpoint, it's just awesome for Vols fans to have Smith back on the field again.
I think aside from Jeremy Pruitt getting the head coaching job, this is the biggest offseason story for this Tennessee football team. This is the best player on your football team, and really, it's really incredible what Trey Smith was able to do last year. I mean, sometimes when you have a program that's as down as Tennessee was last year, it's hard as a freshman to step in and be a good player because odds are there's not a lot of other good players around you. Trey Smith was incredible last year. I mean, listen, I watched it with my own eyes. I watched Trey Smith roll up Raekwon Davis right there on the defensive line when Tennessee played Alabama, and I was astonished. And he did it game after game, week after week, and continued to be successful. So having him at Jeremy Pruitt's disposal, implementing this Tyson Helton offense with possibly a pro-style quarterback behind you, there is no, in my opinion, and this obviously I'm an offensive lineman, there is no bigger storyline for Tennessee this offseason for me.
Perry Williams in the the Facebook comment section says Vols also got some good news on J.J. Peterson, one of those elite signees, outside linebacker from Colquitt County, who's dealing with some academic stuff. I haven't heard that myself, but it sounds like Perry says that J.J. Peterson is going to be good to go. That's also one of those names that a lot of Tennessee fans are hoping to hear good stuff on. So interesting stuff there from Perry Williams. Christy Hardy says, I love watching you guys and always share your page to my sports group I'm in. I will continue to watch you on YouTube as well. Just won't be the same thing. Immediate alerts on my phone. I appreciate watching you guys in SEC Country. Hope you guys come back here soon on Facebook. Well, Christy, we certainly appreciate that. And, it's people like you that have made doing this show so much fun. And we're just really grateful for the time we've been able to spend together. And thanks for reaching out and giving us that comment there. Item number 7 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. A moment ago in the YouTube comment section, Florida fan Morgan Recton said that he wishes that Georgia-Florida played every year on campus in Gainesville and in Athens, as opposed to where the game is a neutral site there in Jacksonville. It's known as the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. Someone who apparently agrees with the commenter is Florida defensive lineman C.C. Jefferson, who said that one of his regrets in his college career was that he never got to play Georgia in Athens. Apparently, Jefferson's watched some UGA games on TV and kind of liked what he saw. Here's C.C. Jefferson.
I kind of wish we went to Georgia and played at Georgia. I wouldn't mind it, man. I wouldn't mind it. Because I ain't going to lie, it gets lit between them hedges, man. At night I seen where they, light the cell phones up and stuff. And, man, it gets loud in there, man. And I think we should, I wouldn't mind, going from our stadium to their stadium every year. We don't have to go to Jacksonville every year.
So how about that from C.C. Jefferson saying, we don't have to go to Jacksonville every year. I kind of like Athens, would have liked to have seen that stadium. Complimentary of Georgia fans, which is kind of an interesting thing to hear from a Gators player. I mean, I said this today on my show, Dog Nation Daily, that neutral site games seem somewhat out of style right now.
Yeah.
Alabama has gone from playing the non-conference neutral site games to scheduled home and home with Texas, scheduled home and home with Notre Dame. We've talked more on this show this offseason about Texas A&M playing Clemson than we have about maybe, say, like Miami and LSU getting together. They're both really good games, but there's something exciting about A&M getting a chance to host Clemson as opposed to the neutral site for Miami and LSU. Right now, that's just not the hot thing in college football. And it's even sort of matriculating down to, a key conference game like this. Now, I will tell you, as a Georgia fan, I've always loved the what's almost like an extra vacation in October when you go down there and you see your team play in Jacksonville against Florida. I've always really enjoyed that. But even a Florida player here says, you know what? I've heard good things about that atmosphere at UGA. I see it on TV. He referenced a tradition that Georgia does, a recent tradition of the fans using cell phones to sort of light up the stadium in the fourth quarter there. It sounds like even a Florida player says, you know what, maybe home and home is the way to do this. This is really kind of a growing trend around college football. Forget Georgia, Florida, just all of college football seems heading more in the direction of home and home as opposed to neutral site.
I agree, and I think that you brought it up the right word. It's trendy, right? It's trendy not to be playing some of these neutral site games, and I got to be honest, putting myself in C.C. Jefferson's shoes, I cannot imagine having gone through my college career, not stepping between the hedges, not playing in Death Valley at night, not hearing the cowbells in Starkville, not going into the swamp to play Chris Leak, Tim Tebow, and the Gators. I can't imagine, my career have ending without playing those games. It blows my mind the fact that C.C. Jefferson isn't going to get to experience that stadium, Sanford Stadium up in Athens. I agree with him. And listen, I think there's some great things to be said about Jacksonville as a host site. I think there's other games, and we've mentioned Birmingham, Legion Field used to be this way. I think there's some great things to be said about it. But in the end, there's a lot of great things that also could be said about the Gators coming to Athens and Georgia returning back to Gainesville. I think that would be incredible.
Rick Keene in the Facebook comment section says, one of my best memories of the Florida-Georgia rivalry was when we beat the Dogs in Athens while they were renovating Alltel Stadium. In 94-95, these two schools did go home and home. Florida won both those, and 1995 was a very conflicted day for me. Florida hammered Georgia in Sanford Stadium, and it really kind of put a dampener on for me later on, which was one of the great sports memories of my life. Braves won the World Series that night. I live in Atlanta. I'm a big Braves fan. So here's the Braves' first World Series championship, and it happens the same day as Georgia getting drubbed by Florida. Now, Georgia was terrible in 95. No one thought Georgia had a chance to win, and Florida was very good. But, yeah, still, you talk about putting a sour taste in your mouth. Georgia giving up 50 at home to Spurrier in 1995.
Good Lord.
It was not fun.
Yeah, that's weird that you put that spin on. I never thought about kind of the interaction between between some of those things because, I was 8 years old in 1995, right. First of all. But, I paid attention to the Braves. That's really interesting.
All right, item number 8 here on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Let's talk a little Texas A&M Aggies, and maybe a subject of interest to them is when they might get things going again with their in-state rival Texas. Tom Herman, the Longhorns coach, is on Sirius XM Radio, ESPNU, this week. They're also having Big 12 media days this week, too, by the way. Herman says, in my perfect world, you'd play one big-time Power 5 non-conference opponent every year. And then he goes on to say, to me, there's a very logical one an hour and a half east of us as to who we ought to be playing. Obviously, a reference there to Texas A&M. The fact that the head coach is now saying this so openly, Herman, to Texas, does this mean we're getting closer to A&M and UT getting back at it again at some point?
I hope so. I just don't see why not. And obviously there's going to be a ton of reasons. And I know the A&M fans in the comment section will remind us of some of those reasons. But I don't think any of them are good reasons. I really don't. I think that you see South Carolina, Clemson. You see Georgia, Georgia Tech. You see Florida, Florida State. These games can happen. And Texas A&M, when they left the Big 12, it raised their profile. And it did all the good things you wanted to do by leaving the Big 12 and coming to the SEC. And I think returning back around and kind of circling back around into that matchup where A&M kind of has this newfound kind of big boy feeling to them. You know what I mean? I think that would be a great thing for everybody involved. And I don't see, like I said, there's going to be reasons. There's going to be bad reasons. I don't see a good reason.
Well, the frustrating thing for me is I've always felt like this is a little bit of a passive-aggressive rivalry because A&M can say, good, finally Texas is saying what they should say. But I'm a big believer that A&M's had its own opportunities to play one-offs against Texas, bowl games where they could have been matched up together. The bowl would have loved to have done it, but I just simply believe that A&M's petitioned the SEC to sort of avoid that kind of matchup when it would have made some sense. Maybe it was sort of slotted to play a team like Texas in the Texas Bowl. Texas has played the Texas Bowl a couple times. There's an SEC tie into that bowl, and yet it was never A&M that did it. So this is one of those things where even though I'm sort of the SEC guy here, I'm a little bit of an SEC homer, I really look at A&M as being just as much to blame on this as I see Texas. Now, I also don't live in the Longhorn State. There is, I should say, the Lone Star State, not the Longhorn State. The Lone Star State, I don't live in the Lone Star State. There's probably a lot of political backstory on this that I'm not privy to. But just based on what I am aware of, I don't know that A&M is blameless in this either.
I don't think they are. And like I said, there's going to be reasons that come up that people are going to spit out and say, well, this is a reason, or this politician or this president. There's just no good reasons, in my opinion, why this can't happen. And I think another angle to look at, and Cliff Nelson says, as long as they don't play at the end of the season and screw up LSU's schedule. Now, I don't.
That's good, Cliff.
I don't think that. Listen, I don't think they're concerned about LSU's schedule, but I do think that, in my opinion, if they do get this rivalry back together, can we get it on some weekend other than rivalry weekend? Can we spread the love throughout the season? Can we get it week 2? Can we get it week 3? Can we get it at one of these points where, we can see some of these games starting to take shape?
Let me get Bo Molinari on this, who says Texas needs the rivalry, A&M doesn't, so there's going to have to be some concessions. And that's the kind of stuff that I don't love about this, but I know that Bo's a lot more tied into the story from an emotional standpoint than I am. Bo also says Texas told the member schools in the Big 12 not to schedule the Aggies as punishment, so he's obviously still holding a grudge against that. I don't doubt that, but we let bygones be bygones.
I think we're talking about college football rivalries here. I don't think there's any bygones going to be letting be bygones in college football rivalries. Everybody's at fault when you talk about stuff.
All right, let me pick up the pace here a little bit. Item number 9 on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. So Florida coach Dan Mullen speaks at SEC Media Days yesterday, and he's obviously trying to lay down sort of a new era for Florida. And there's a phrase you're going to hear him use a lot in this clip that apparently is trying to be maybe a bit of a catchphrase for the Gators. I've got to admit I don't hate it, but boy, Mullen's selling it hard. Here's Dan Mullen from yesterday's SEC Media Days.
It's exciting to get the season kicked off and get ready to get football rolling and get ourselves into the fall. So I'm thrilled to be the head coach at the University of Florida. It's a great honor for me to be there and take over a program that has so much history and tradition of winning. I'm excited to build that standard back, get the Gator standard back to where everyone expects it to be. When you think of the Gator standard, you're thinking about a university of excellence. Everything about the Gator standard is excellence, whether it's academics, athletics, research. The University of Florida stands for excellence, and that's the Gator standard. And I want to make sure I get our football program back on top and continue that excellence of where we've been.
I counted 4 uses of the phrase Gator standard there in that from Dan Mullen. So he's clearly trying to sell that phrase hard. Maybe he was told to. Maybe that's part of a PR campaign. But from a Florida standpoint, I actually don't hate it because that's one of the issues that I've had with Florida in recent years. And this seems like a Georgia guy taking a jab at the Gators. In a way, it's really a compliment and not a backhanded compliment that there is a standard at Florida. Now, I don't care about the other sports as much. We're a show mostly devoted to football. Florida's good at other sports. That doesn't matter as much to me. But in football, there's a really high standard at Florida. And Jim McElwain didn't achieve that. And Will Muschamp didn't achieve that. As much as I like Muschamp now, he didn't achieve that at Florida. But it's important to remember what your standard is. It was set by Urban Meyer. It was set first by Steve Spurrier. And Mullen talking that way is the right talk for Florida.
No, I think it is. And he also used the term University of Excellence. I mean, he used excellence 3 times that I counted in that, in that phrasing too. And I think he's going down the right path. We've said this all along that Florida's one of those places that should recruit itself. It doesn't seem to be going that way for Dan Mullen right now, so I understand why he's trying to put things kind of front and center. It did kind of bring me back, though. My first year with the Falcons, we had this PR guy walking, and he says, "Hey, we got this new phrase coming out. We're going to be saying 'rise up' a lot."
Oh, is that right?
It was like, okay, I don't know really what that means, but "rise up" sounds pretty good. It has stuck, and it has rode out.
Near Atlanta, you hear "rise up" all the time. Tim Glover, by the way, on Dan Mullen says he can get Florida back to the top of the East. Obviously, that's what Gators fans hope ends up being.
Yeah, and listen, I don't know long run what Dan Mullen is at Florida. I think he's got a lot of good players to work with this year. It's going to be tough to surpass what Kirby Smart is doing at Georgia right now, but I do think he is in the right place at the right time.
Y'all are still talking about muffins over in the YouTube comment section as well. I may not live that one down for a while. That may stick to Mullen here. The muffin. Maybe that sticks to him.
It's a shame. It's a shame that tomorrow's our last day because that one could have rode out.
James Ackland, who I guess for today is not calling us a clown, says Florida's going to win a minimum of 9 games here in 2018. You got 9 for the Gators?
I've got 8, and I listed them earlier off for some of the people over in the YouTube comment section, and some of these
you typed 8 games in the middle of the show?
Charles,
do you listen to anything that I say?
Not much.
Are you just over here typing it? Were you writing a blog post?
Not much. Cliff and some of the others were saying I don't see 6 wins. I said I got 8 out of them.
All right, we got to hurry up here. Item number 10, Missouri's at SEC Media Days today. Did you see any of this?
No.
I didn't either.
No, and listen, I was, like you said, I was trying to work the room. I was in politician mode, but Missouri, it is what it is. I'll catch it later tonight, and I'll read some of the comments, and I'm sure they'll be really entertaining.
A lot of talk about Drew Lock, and he probably deserves that, right? I mean,
he should.
He's a first-round pick in all likelihood. I mean, this is what you come back for to get the attention. He's probably going to get at SEC Media Days today. Opposite of Alabama in the room at the same time.
Right.
But that's the attention he deserves.
And it does. And I think that when you talk about a guy that could be, if he wasn't at a place like Missouri right now, I think if he was at a lot of other schools, he would be the face kind of the SEC moving into the year. I really do.
Yeah.
But I just don't think that profile is there right now in Columbia, Missouri.
All right, one big final show for us tomorrow. We're going to take a lot of comments, really just have a lot of fun with all of you, and we'll hope you'll be a part of it at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. But for today, there's still a little bit more work to take care of. You know, we always look to close the show the same way every day, and we're going to keep on doing it here during our final week on the air. We're always looking for champions of life, and I will tell you that I love golf. My favorite golfer is Phil Mickelson, and this is one of the coolest videos that I've seen. Although I wouldn't trust Phil Mickelson to do this for anything in the world. The British Open takes place this weekend, and Mickelson getting ready for that with his friends from Callaway Golf, showing off an amazing, and I mean amazing, trick flop shot here. Would you trust a professional golfer to do this? Watch this for a second. All right, here it comes. The flop shot just over his head there, just flips right over. Watch this, and we have the slow motion right here. I mean, this is real, folks.
I mean, you can see this guy's hair flying back from the wind off the golf club. You couldn't pay me to step in front of somebody swinging a golf club like that.
Is that a Callaway executive? It has to be, right?
It has to be.
I mean, like if that ball hits you, you could die.
You can knock your teeth out. I mean, not only, listen, there could be some bad medical stuff, but imagine the bad PR for Callaway.
Oh, no doubt.
Phil Mickelson hits Callaway executive in the chin.
Yeah, it's been a rough go for Phil here a little bit as well. That's the last thing he needs is to be braining somebody with a golf ball. Nonetheless, thanks so much for being with the show. We've been telling you this, we mean this. SEC Country Live on YouTube. To find out more about what's next for us together, SEC Country Live on YouTube is the place to go. It's linked there in the Facebook comment section for those of you who are watching. And our podcast, go ahead and subscribe to that SEC Country Live. That's also a really good spot to check in on to find out what's next for us working together. One big final day tomorrow. We're going to make it fun for you, and we'll hope you'll be a part of it with us right here on SEC Country Live.